gonna kick things off. Cool. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is the first community meetup for 2023, so Happy New Year to everyone in the community. We have a jam-packed session today, a call today, with a lot of updates, a lot of good things are going. So I'm just gonna kick us off, be respectful to everyone's time. Questions, if you don't mind, please pull your question towards the end. We're gonna have some time, and also obviously in the chat, feel free to pop your questions, and we have all the product managers and everyone from the Azure Arc and the hybrid crew around. Cool. All right, first meetup, like I mentioned, for 2023. Nothing has changed in terms of the logistics. All the content will be available post meetup in our GitHub repository and also on the YouTube channel with the recordings. Feel free to go and download those. Please mute your microphone if you haven't already. Just kind of be respectful to everyone here. And that's the GitHub repository in case you're not familiar with that. If you are here, you probably are, but this is where you're going to find all the content post meetup and future updates on the community moving forward. All right, with that, like I mentioned, packed agenda. We're going to kick things off with some updates on the Jumpstart, our enabled container apps. We have Andrew here to provide some exciting updates. AKS hybrid deployment options and identity and access management updates, Arc-enabled data services, SQL MI, Arc Resource Bridge, Azure Arc-enabled manage, and quick ask from the Arc-enabled Kubernetes team. And then we're going to have some time for Q&A. Cool. Let's get going. All right, pretty packed release when it comes to the Jumpstart. So let's just kind of give you an update real quick on what's going on. First of all, community contribution from Mike Hellers from the field here in Microsoft, using Cluster Connect to connect to Azure Arc-enabled Kubernetes cluster via service account. This is also something like we're also developing the Active Directory one. In case you're familiar with that space and that feature, pretty cool one, letting you to connect to Azure Arc-enabled Kubernetes clusters without the kubeconfig, just kind of in a more secured fashion, in a JIT fashion. So that's a new scenario. Deploy Azure Container Apps on AKS using ARM templates. Andrew is going to touch based on this later on, but this is our first scenario for container apps with Azure Arc. So we're pretty excited about that. A lot of improvements and a lot of things are happening also in the Azure Arc-enabled SQL Server space, as Nikita will share with you in this meetup. This is a new scenario for integrating Defender for SQL and BPA, which is basically the best practices assessment feature. That's a new feature. Again, Nikita is going to touch base on that. A new scenario for that. And also our first scenario for AKS hybrid in the context of AKS Edge Essentials. So this scenario will walk you through on how to deploy AKS Edge Essentials in an automated fashion using ARM templates and everything that you need, Jumpstart way. Also, a lot of features and a lot of enhancements in this release for RBox specifically. The first one is we finished the migration with all the MMA to AMA related automations. So again, if you're following RBox and if you've been using it like many of you are, you know that MMA has been there for a while, and now we finished the migration to the Azure Monitoring Agent. Microsoft Defender for SQL servers and best practices assessment. Again, same as the scenario. Now this is also incorporated into RBox, and a great community contribution from Jan here from Microsoft. SSH access to Azure Arc-enabled servers. I'm personally pretty excited about these features. Not many are aware of this feature, but it's a pretty cool one, allowing you to SSH or RDP to Arc-enabled servers without having, the ports open and everything. So again, check it out. Pretty cool stuff. All the details are in the release notes in the link, and obviously we're posting a lot of things in social media as well. Wanted to share with you a few things that are coming soon. Okay. Thank you. Wanted to share with you a few things that are coming soon with the Jumpstart. Just a few highlights here. HCI box additions, Azure Arc-enabled SQL managed instance, and container.
Did everyone else lose audio?
Yeah, I lost audio here.
I think I got muted as well. All right. Let me go back for a second. So I'm not sure where everyone lost me, so I'm just going to repeat the RBox session. Migration to AMA is completed. Microsoft Defender for SQL servers and BPA is also now included in RBox, the same as the scenario. And a great contribution from Jan around the SSH access to Azure Arc-enabled servers. Again, all the details are in the release notes. Check it out. A lot of good things happen in this release for RBox, and multiple bug fixes as well that we got on the repository. Wanted to share with you a few things on what is coming. So a couple of critical strategic features or enhancements that are coming to HCI box soon. Azure Arc-enabled SQL managed instance and container apps are going to be included in HCI box pretty soon. We're expecting this to land in the next month or so. So stay tuned. More AKS hybrid scenarios, like I mentioned, we started with AKS Edge Essentials, and obviously we have HCI box, which include AKS on HCI. So you're gonna continue seeing that trend around AKS hybrid scenarios and automations rolling into the Jumpstart. AKS Edge Essentials video series, that's a new thing that we're working on. So again, wait for some updates on this one, but we're gonna have a deep dive 3 or 4 part series around the AKS Edge Essentials, architectures, demos, deployments, and all those good stuff. And last but not least, Azure Auto Managed additions to RBox. This is something that a lot of people reached out. Yes, we are working on this. It's going to take us probably a couple of months to finish, everything that we want for this first batch, but definitely stay tuned for some updates around that. Cool. With that, Andrew, I'll pass the torch to you. If you want to take the screen, because I know that you also have a demo, correct? And you're on mute, so.
Yeah. Let me just take over.
Feel free.
Go. Okay, great to be back in this community meetup. It's been a while. So today I'm going to talk to you about Azure Container Apps on Azure Arc. And first and foremost, I just want to set the scene of what Container Apps is. So Container Apps is our managed service in public cloud for hosting serverless-based container apps. So anything an app can run inside a container, primarily for microservices. It builds on the work that we already did for the previous preview of App Service on Arc. We took it a bit further and actually built out a managed service in public cloud. Build modern apps on open source technologies, again, focusing on the application, not the infrastructure, and then seamlessly move through that. Underneath the hood, we use Kubernetes, obviously. That's ever clear in Arc. Obviously, we use an Arc-enabled Kubernetes. You have access to CADA for scaling, Dapper, the distributed application runtime to enable integration with multiple services out of the box, and Envoy for our reverse proxy capability at the front end. What can you build with Azure Container Apps? Pretty wide and varied, actually, to be honest. What you can actually build, you can build everything from a microservice, web APIs, web applications themselves, event-driven processing. So you could see, I know we've had some customers decide to move some of their function apps into containers and then run those on top of container apps. So we've seen that kind of thing. And then in addition, background processing as well. If I just minimize that, you'll see some of the details around the auto scale capabilities. And we're looking to bring exactly the same experience down to Arc-enabled Kubernetes. And that's what we announced in public preview in mid-December last year. We were targeting November. We just ran into a couple of last-minute pre-release issues that we had to go through. So it's an early preview of the capability. And initially, we're targeting AKS, HCI, and AKS, which is why you're certainly seeing that synergy between us and within Leor's team and the Jumpstart scenarios, which is why you can see the container apps on Azure Arc with AKS scenario now, and then we're excited to see that run through on HCI box as well. I've been personally using HCI box quite a bit since it came out, so it's been very, very useful. Portal support is available, and we'll go through that in a quick demo, along with private CLI extension. All of the details of where to get that are in the documentation. We are looking to unify the CLI extension with the Container Apps public extension, so you don't have to have two. But at this point, if you need to switch between the two environments, you have to uninstall one to install the other. GitHub Actions are supported out today during the public preview, so you can use the same GitHub action as with container apps to target an Arc-enabled cluster. We're working with the VS Code, VS, Azure DevOps teams to add additional support, and that's in progress, and then we'll move forward. One key gotcha, you can't deploy the application services extension and the container apps extension on the same cluster. Some of the bits that we use underneath the hood are very much similar, and at this point, we don't have the ability to run them side by side. And then, as I call out, the jumpstart scenario is available. Obviously, I'll be around for the entire course, so if there's questions at the end, I'm happy to field them. But also, if there's anything you want to follow up with me afterwards, there's my contact details. And with that, let's close down. Let's see. Yes, I have a nice clean cluster to go with. So, from a extension enablement point of view, you can install the extension through CLI, or we can, when the portal decides to play ball, add the extension directly through the portal. We have this. This is something we didn't have with the app services extension from day one, but we did have this from the container apps extension. And so we can go through and create that. I'm not going to do it end to end. I just want to work through some of the key elements here. Extension details, set a custom location and bind that automatically out of the hood. And then we only support load balancer service type, same as with the application services extension. We do require your Kubernetes cluster to be able to support load balancer service types. And if you use AKS as an additional flag, we just need to know the info group for that Kubernetes cluster. Past that, monitoring, we support log analytics workspace-based monitoring for all apps per connected environment. And so per basically deployment of the extension. That's the limitation at this point, that we only support log analytics workspaces. In future, we are looking to roll out full support for Azure Monitor, but we need some bits and pieces doing underneath the hood within Arc first before we can do that. That will deploy. You'll notice key differences from the original experience when we did app service. We don't need a static IP up front. Through the CLI, you can pass it in if you wish to specify it, but you don't need to. What happens under the hood is during runtime, our control plane inspects the services that are bound to our extension and determines that IP and stores it, and then does the DNS registration based on that. If for whatever reason your cluster's load balancer service endpoint changes, you can do a put on the connected environment, and we'll go and discover that again and pass that in. That's where we are with the extension. Then from a create experience, same as if you've ever used container apps in public cloud, you'll see exactly the same experience with a slight modification to support custom locations. So we'll go through and create a container app. I'm going to choose one that I've already created today, Jan 30, and we're going to do just jumpstart up. Oh. And immediately, because I've got a number of custom locations here, then I can see custom locations with the extension already enabled. I'm going to choose that Jan 31. And you'll see here a container apps environment. A public cloud has this concept of a managed environment, which is a container apps environment. And it's a logical grouping of all apps within inside that one location. And the way we envisage it is that there'll be a environment per custom location, and the resource type for Arc is actually a connected environment. So we do have a distinction between the two, because a managed environment is fully managed by Microsoft. A connected environment is obviously deployed on a customer's cluster, and so therefore we don't own that cluster. So therefore we made a distinction between the two in terms of the ARM resource types, because there's certain things that will show up in managed environments that won't show up in connected environments because of that management ownership. Next, for the app settings, you can choose to use either a quick start image, which is what we're going to do here, or you can obviously choose to deploy from a container registry, from Docker Hub, other registries, go through, select your image, set container resource allocation. Today, these are all the same as we use in public cloud. That may change over the due course of time because obviously we understand every customer has a different underlying cluster and capabilities, and then set environment variables, and you can manage ingress for the application itself. So you can either limit it within inside the environment itself, so then only apps within inside that environment can reach it, or you accept traffic from anywhere. For Arc-enabled container apps, you will not see limited to VNet enable because that is unique to Azure. Transport again, you can have that configured HTTP1, HTTP2, allow secure, insecure connections if you wish to. But let's go back to and create the app. We'll go off, create the app. We'll see if this is going to be, should be fairly rapid because this cluster's been scaled out previously. If it's not, we'll do, now I'm back in England, I can truly say we could do a Blue Peter moment and go and look at one I created earlier. But we'll give it a second. We'll see if that comes up. It's normally fairly rapid. Nope, okay, I'm not going to wait. So I'm going to go to another one. CL app new. This is, there we go. We'll go to the actual resource we just created. You'll see we create a URL, the same as in the past. We can open that up. There we go, very basic Hello World app. But you can see the experience is exactly the same as you would see in public cloud for a container app. You've got access to the easy auth capability that we have in app service functions and logic apps and now in container apps. So you can stick authentication with a variety of providers, integration directly with Kubernetes secrets underneath the hood, control over ingress, custom domain binding, log streaming directly from the cluster. We're enabled to do log streaming. Obviously, if for whatever reason the cluster becomes semi-disconnected, this kind of capability is not going to work because we won't actually have a connection to the cluster. Equally, you can open up console access to individual containers with inside the deployment. All the scaling and capabilities are there as well. I'd encourage you to go and explore, look at use cases and see what you can make use of it. And with that, Leo, I think I'll hand back to you, good self.
Thanks so much, Andrew. And Cam, I see you in there. I'll give you the mic towards the end, okay, in the Q&A section, because we are just, have a bit of package, and I want to make sure that everyone's got the chance to speak, okay? So just leave your hands up, and I'll get back to you if that's okay. Sure. I am resharing my screen. Sumit, you want to take it away? Sumit is there? No?
Oh, my bad. I was muted. My bad.
Okay. Take it away, Sumit.
Yeah. So could you go to the next slide, please, Will?
Of course.
All right. So we are releasing the January update as of this month. The first thing I wanted to share is with the January update, we will be no longer supporting some of these older releases, which we are called out here, specifically the February, March, and May release. But we'll continue to support the September, October, and the January release going forward. The second update that I would like to share is that earlier, when you were deploying AKS-CI cluster on a cluster that had existing Arc VMs, they needed to be uninstalled. With this release, you could continue to have these existing Arc managed VMs while you end up installing AKS-CI cluster on those HCI clusters. The third update, which is one of the feedback we received, was when we deploy AKS-CI, there are certain checks that we are going to be preloading. Some of these checks are including that you have the right permissions, you have set this up in the right Azure locations, and there are a bunch of others. The idea is that we want to preload these checks so you don't end up having a cluster deployment fail at the end. And so it'll fail right up front. The last update that I have, at least for this slide, is the GPU-enabled node pools are now in preview. We will touch upon the Azure AD and the RBAC in the next session. So Larry, could go to the next slide, please. So here I want to talk about what are the different identity and access management options that are supported for AKS Hybrid. Let me quickly go over them with you. The first and second are already shipping. The first one is the ability to use your Active Directory credentials to have a single sign-on experience from your client machine when you're connecting to the control plane. So there are a couple of things here. So it works only for direct line of sight. So you have to be within the private network. It doesn't work if you're trying to connect to the cluster over the internet. So this is already shipping. The second option that we have was using your Azure AD credentials. And here the authorization is going to happen based on your Kubernetes local role binding. This is also shipping and supported, but it doesn't work with direct line of sight. It works over the internet. The third option is currently in preview, and it essentially works for Windows and Linux, both clients. It also supports both direct line of sight as well as via internet. This feature is currently in preview, and I have all the links posted here. What I'll do is this slide is if you may go back, Larry, just really quick. So I'll update the contact details here if you have any questions going forward. So that's all. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sumit. I believe Nikita is next. Nikita?
Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So hi, everyone. I'm Nikita Tuckru. I'm a product manager in Microsoft's Azure Arc Enabled Data Services team. And I'm really excited to be here to go over the latest features that we've released for Azure Arc Enabled Data Services as part of this release. So what we're going to do is we're going to dive into the capabilities that these different features unlock for customers, specifically looking at Azure Arc Enabled SQL Server and Azure Arc Enabled SQL Managed Instance. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So first we'll start out by discussing the updates for Azure Arc Enabled SQL Server. So as part of this release for Azure Arc Enabled SQL Server, we've actually launched the SQL Best Practice Assessment. This is the one Lior was mentioning earlier today. So in the past, we actually used to have the Environment Health Assessment here, and this is now replaced with a much richer experience, which is the Best Practice Assessment, also known as SQL BPA. This is a feature that you can actually go ahead and access in the Azure portal today. So you might be wondering, what is this SQL Best Practice Assessment? So let's, talk about what it is at a high level. At a high level, the Best Practice Assessment is providing you with a mechanism to essentially evaluate the configuration of your SQL Server. Once the Best Practice Assessment feature is enabled, your SQL Server instance and databases are constantly scanned to provide recommendations for things like SQL Server and database configurations, index management, deprecated features, enabled or missing trace flags, statistics, and so on and so forth. So essentially, the Best Practice Assessment is helping you to identify possible performance issues. And it will tell you if your Azure Arc Enabled SQL Server is following the best practices. And if it's not following the best practices, the recommendations will also be provided to you of how you can actually mitigate these detected issues as well. So the second update that I want to go over now is the ability to view SQL Server databases in Azure Arc directly. So this is a feature that we had discussed in our last community call. And to kind of quickly recap what this feature is it's part of the Azure portal, and it lets our customers ease up inventorying and reporting scenarios with the ability to now get rich insights around your SQL Server databases. As part of this release, what has changed is that we've actually populated 2 new properties which you can query for. So these 2 properties are the earliest restore time and the last backup time for database resources as well. So you can now leverage those additional capabilities too. Besides this, we also have pay-as-you-go billing license model for Azure Arc Enabled SQL Server, which we discussed in the last community call as well. The update for this month is that now this feature extends to SQL 2012 or greater. Additionally, as part of this release, when you're actually onboarding your Arc-enabled SQL servers, you now have the option to specify the license type as well. So this could be whether it's, pay-as-you-go billing, paid, which is license type with software assurance, or even license only. During this onboarding process, as a customer, you can also skip SQL instances from registration during the onboarding process. And this experience is one that you can access in the Azure portal as well. So these are all of the updates that we have for Azure Arc-enabled SQL Server for this month. And with that being said, please do try out these features. And now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and move on to discuss what are the updates with Azure Arc-enabled SQL Managed Instance. There are two main updates for Arc Data Services and SQL Managed Instance, which I wanted to go over with all of you today. The first one is that we've launched Kafka separate mode for Arc Data Services. And what this means is the feature at a high level is going to be providing more stability and better security for the existing telemetry router that we have. The telemetry router now actually deploys Kafka in separate mode by default. And if you're a customer who's using this telemetry router, you'll notice that you have one broker and one controller pod for Kafka. So that's what the change is. And the last update that I also wanted to share with all of you today is that Arc SQL Managed Instance now supports the time series functions as well. So you can definitely go ahead and leverage those. And then I've attached resources here, which, feel free to check it out. These are, documentation pages highlighting the different features, blog posts that we're covering different scenarios. So please do try out our features as well. These were all of the updates that I wanted to go over for Azure Arc-enabled data services for this month. We're really excited to hear how all of you are using these features. And with that being said, I will hand it back to you, Lior.
Thank you so much, Nikita. Definitely a jam-packed release, especially on the SQL Server side of the house. I think that we have Aline next. Take it away.
All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Aileen Tran, the PM for Arc Resource Bridge. It's been a while since I've joined a community meetup, so Happy New Year to you all. Just a reminder, Arc Resource Bridge works with select private clouds to allow on-prem resources to be managed from Azure. It's pretty cool, so if you haven't checked it out yet, go ahead and check it out. We're in public preview right now. I've got a few updates for you. The first is that we're continuing to add more information on Microsoft Learn to help you understand what's needed to deploy and maintain Arc Resource Bridge. Those updates are just rolling out now, and we'll continue to add to them. There's a link to the side if you want to check that out. At the bottom of our Microsoft Learn page, you'll see that there's an option to leave feedback. Feel free to let us know your experience and feedback, or you can email me directly. My email is also to the side. We've also started up a GitHub, so if you'd like to see release info or submit an issue, go ahead and visit us on our GitHub. And we've got a few updates for our Azure CLI commands. The logs command used to require the kubeconfig to be passed in order to pull logs. We've changed that so you can pass either the appliance VM IP or the kubeconfig because having options is always nice, right? And then we've also made some updates to our create config command. Before, there was only the interactive experience where you'd get prompted to enter each parameter. Now we've added a non-interactive experience. We've made updates to both. So for the interactive experience, we provide more information now on what to pass for each parameter. And for the non-interactive mode, if you pass all the parameters needed to create the configuration files, you can just skip all the prompting. It's a lot faster. We've also updated the help with more details for the parameters. Cool. Okay, so last but not least, we've made updates to the validate command. So this is the command that you want to run before you try to deploy Arc Resource Bridge. What it does is it checks the configuration files and network settings to ensure smooth deployment. We've been adding to the validations that happen in terms of like network settings, and we're continuing to improve it as we find more errors popping up. So if it finds something wrong, it'll return an actionable error now, and we're continuing to build upon it. So be sure to run that before you deploy Arc Resource Bridge. And that's all I've got. So feel free to reach out to me, and thanks everybody.
Thanks so much, Aline. And I'll hand it over to Arnav.
Hey folks, so talking about Azure Arc enabled servers, sort of our neck of the woods. I can go ahead and go to the next slide. Just some brief updates here. So first thing we wanted to call out is we have not one but two versions of the connected machine agent, 1.25, and now we're at 2.6 already. Noting that 2.6 is Linux specific. So you'll be excited to learn that we've got Red Hat Linux RHEL 9 support added in, and we've already added Rocky Linux 8 as well, in case that kind of flew under the radar. There have been a lot of quality enhancements that we've been focused on from the Arc server side. So there have been reliability improvements in the machine configuration sort of engine. And I think Jody is going to be up next as well, speaking to machine configuration. There are improved error messages in terms of our Windows MSI installer, and some improvements in terms of our detection logic for Stack HCI. Another thing we wanted to call out here is we did have a sort of hotfix around MDE deployment for Linux specifically. So we've increased the resource limits for MDE extension deployments on Linux to improve installation reliability. Some other updates we have is group policy onboarding, where you can actually generate a group policy object for at-scale onboarding of your Arc-enabled servers. And that's going to use DP API encryption to encrypt your service principal secret, so you can apply a GPO at scale to onboard a number of Arc-enabled servers at scale. That's now generally available in Azure Portal, and we're really excited about that to continue easing up the sort of onboarding experience for Azure Arc. The other thing is change tracking and inventory using AMA. That's also now public preview. You might have missed this as well, but during, I think, November end, Azure Automation with their hybrid runbook extension worker also went GA as well for Arc-enabled servers. So we're continuing to see a lot of the services now, I think, for AMA all reach public preview with their V2s. And so it's quickly moving towards GA as well for those corresponding services with AMA, as customers are migrating from the old log analytics agents to Azure Monitor Agent, which affords not just the better performance data and better kind of authentication story, but also really with data collection rules, a lot more granularity from a multi-homing perspective, and also cost-saving benefits, which I know are top of mind right now. So those are some of the main updates I have in terms of new services that have reached public preview in GA, and with that group policy for at-scale onboarding. I've shared some pieces there in terms of change tracking for AMA, as well as kind of what's new with the Arc-enabled servers agent that has, our release notes as well. And that's a high-level overview of kind of what updates we have from the Arc-enabled server neck of the woods. The only other thing to note is we are doing some explorations around Azure Backup. And specifically around this, we are going to be preparing a survey. So if you are interested and you have some feedback about bringing in Azure backup capabilities to Arc-enabled servers, and you have a perspective on this, please send an email over to me or my colleague Ryan, and we'll love your perspective on this as well. There will be a formalized survey that we're working on, and a study that's upcoming. So we'd love your kind of feedback on that as well. So that's it from my neck of the woods in terms of updates with the connected machine agent and what's new with Arc-enabled servers. So thanks, and I think there are some hands raised. I'm not sure if they're for
Yeah,
Arc server.
we'll wait for the end, Arno. We'll wait for
all right.
take questions
All right.
at the end. Yeah.
All right, sounds great. Always happy
Cool.
to answer questions. So
Thanks, Arno. I think I'll hand it on to Jody. Jody, take us away.
Hey folks, I hope everyone's having a good morning. So today I'm going to be talking about some updates to Azure Automated Machine Configuration, which, just as a reminder, is a way to natively audit or configure operating systems as code across your app workload or server workloads. So we've got some really exciting updates with our newest agent release, including full built-in PowerShell, which now ships as a part of the machine configuration engine. So this means that built-in PowerShell modules can now be leveraged within machine configuration custom artifacts. And alongside this, in addition to the Windows built-in PowerShell modules that you can also include all community modules, which can now be released with custom configuration artifacts. So we really listened to the DSC community here and are really excited to announce this capability. And in addition to this, we are now allowing for support of additional parameter types such as integers and booleans, which can now be written into your custom DSC resources as well. So in addition to these improvements, we also have additional OS support across Red Hat 9, Mariner 1, and Mariner 2. And outside of that, we're also just want to replug the call to action, which is that we're looking for feedback from customers with experience using Azure Automation DSC, as well as machine configuration. So this is really the time to let your voice be heard in terms of the future of both products. So the link to this survey is in the panel here, but I'll go ahead and post that in the chat as well. So again, please feel free to reach out if there are any questions about any of the features mentioned, and also please make your voice heard in the survey. So I'll go ahead and post that in the chat now, and that's it for me. Short and sweet. Thanks, Lior.
Thanks so much, Jody. And we have Dan. Dan, take us home.
Hi there, everyone. So I'm from the Arc-enabled Kubernetes team. So really, this is just an ask of you. We're looking at the product at the moment, looking to see where we can improve the product. And so if you love or hate Arc for Kubernetes, we'd love to speak to you. And so if you're happy to talk to us, please reach out to us on aka.ms/arc for Kubernetes in that link below. So short and sweet from me. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. There's no hate in this call, only love. You know, that's what we're all about. All right. Time for some questions. Before we get into the question, I see a couple of hands. So give me one more minute. Just going to provide another update here regarding content and documentations. So I forgot to mention this at the beginning. If you've been following the Learn documentation on Microsoft Docs, which changed the name to Learn and all, you will see that there is a lot of new documentation updates on the Azure Arc side of the house. I want to call out one specific update that you should look into, and maybe one of the PMs can paste it in the chat. If not, I'll paste it after the call. We released a pretty massive update when it comes to the network requirements around Azure Arc. So this is collaboration between all the product groups just kind of coming together, making sure that we have everything in one place, and we keep improving that. I mean, one of the most common feedbacks that we're getting is around network requirements and simplicity and all that good stuff. So we definitely take those things to heart, and we just released, like I mentioned, a massive update on this one. So that's update number one. Update number two is, and again, I'll paste those links in the chat shortly. As part of the Jumpstart, if you've been following this, we also have a community version of the Arc library deck and also the Jumpstart overview deck. So if you care about the stuff and if you want to get all the official Azure Arc, photographics and architectures and all those good things, I'll paste the link in a second here. Everything is out for grabs. You can go download this from the repository and just use it with your, in your own environment, with your customers, with your partners, and internally and whatnot. So just wanted to call it out. Again, we'll paste the links shortly. With that, we have a couple of hands. Cam, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. I hope I'm not butchering it, but please feel free to ask your question.
In fact, it is Gem, but no problem. So
Gem.
my question is about the first part with the AKS site. So let me ask the capability of using that stuff with DevOps at the same time.
So was that in relation to ACA?
I believe so. It was relation with container apps, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Apologies. I'm also in the office, and some of my colleagues are also talking at the same time, so I'm just losing you. So can you say it again, please?
Yeah. So container apps on Arc today doesn't support deployment direct using Azure DevOps pipelines. You could, in theory, script everything and use the same CLI extension and do it manually, but the native support for a task for deploying a container app is not there. We prioritize doing GitHub Actions first, but we're working on it.
Yeah, so there will be an option in the future that will happen in this way, I can tell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I have some kind of expectation that some of the companies do not have the chance to use that solution because of the GDPR, cloud solution. But if it is mature enough that you can use the DevOps environment plus the Kubernetes services and applications, etc. In this way, that will be also a good way of just providing this to customers. And let's say, hey, you can use still the flexibility in this manner.
Yeah, we've had the same request for public cloud to enable Azure DevOps pipeline publishing of container apps to public cloud. And we'll be working on both avenues, both for private clusters and also, i.e. Arc-enabled clusters, and also for there's work ongoing in public cloud.
Good to hear that I'm not the only alien then.
Plenty of our customers still use Azure DevOps, and there's no issues with that. We want to support both.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jim. Christopher, I see your hand there.
Hi, how are you doing? I have a question about the resource bridge. I previously worked a lot. Actually, my entire role was with government clients. Now I'm back in the public, but I still do have some government
Ja,
customers.
zo leuk. Ja.
When is the resource bridge going to be?
Beheersrol aan.
Hello? Yeah, when will the resource? That's okay. When will the resource bridge? I know it's in preview, and I know that everything that goes in the government cloud is usually delayed until after it goes GA. But is there a roadmap for some of these services, especially resource bridge? Because we have a lot of government customers in the past that would really love to use like the services that HCI provided, but they're very limited. And I'm just kind of curious if there's a roadmap for resource bridge being introduced to the government cloud.
Gotcha. Yeah. Thanks for your question, Christopher. And feel free to reach out to me on email too, and I can give you updates. We're doing our next semester planning in the coming months. Probably in March is when we'll start. And expanding to government cloud is one of the things that we're assessing now. So thanks for voicing your interest in that, because that definitely helps us prioritize where we land next.
Sweet. Thank you.
Christopher, also feel free to reach out to me. And like Elaine mentioned, you can reach her as well, but feel free to reach out so I can also document your request there. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much. I don't see any more hands. Or I just got another one. Stefan. Yes, Stefan. Take it. Stefan?
Oh, sorry, my headphone was muted. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. At the risk of being clear for all other participants here, how would you install application package on a Windows server over Azure Arc? I have a customer that no longer wants using config manager for their servers. And for the update side, it's really clear that you can use Azure Arc for that. But how do I do that with for applications?
Sure, that's a great question. So Arnav from the Arc-enabled server side here. Right now, the recommended approach, right, and this is definitely a workaround, is using custom script extension. From a scripting perspective, or potentially DSC with machine configuration for the software deployment. This is obviously a workaround. Something on our roadmap is actually VM apps, and that's sort of the preferred route for software deployment. And that in tandem with Update Management Center, you can imagine, provides the update path from SCCM. But VM apps is on the roadmap. It's not currently currently in private preview for Arc servers yet, but this is something we are working on in very early phases. But right now, if you do want to do software deployments, you can use machine configuration DSC or custom script extension. But again, that's definitely not a mature experience, especially compared to what you're used to in SCCM land.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, thank you. Only one question ahead of this answer. VM applications, do you handle there also reboots and so on? So I don't have tried in Azure itself, so that's a question why I ask.
So start-stop capabilities are not something you have for Arc-enabled servers right now. You do have that for Arc-enabled like VMware vSphere or any of the Arc-enabled private cloud VM types, but because we are at the guest kind of OS level, we're not able to do that for Arc Server right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Stefan. I don't see any more hands. So once, twice. All right. With that, that's the end of the community call for January. Thank you everyone for joining us. Feel free to reach out either on Teams or in the over email. And if you have any requests, something that you want us to cover in the next time, please feel free to reach out. And some resources. Obviously, we shared all of those throughout the presentation. And thank you, everyone, and have a good day.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.